When you hear the word social worker, what do you think of? What capacity do they work within? You might instantly think of someone who works for the government at a county or state level, helping individuals or families that are going through a rough time or have newly immigrated to the country. But it could also mean helping someone experiencing homelessness, domestic violence, or addiction. The reality is that social workers operate within a large network of settings and specialties.
From birth until death, you'll come across a social worker, whether that is through child welfare, behavioral health, substance use, career counseling, financial planning, corporate social work or corporate social responsibility, leadership, education. We are in a lot of different spaces and really expanding in many more sectors to do a lot of our work.
That's Dr. Anthony Estreet, the CEO of the National Association of Social Workers. He's also a professor of social work at Morgan State University. For more than 15 years, Estreet worked as a social worker in various behavioral health clinics. He points out that social workers are the largest provider of professional behavioral health services in the U.S. This includes short and long-term counseling, therapy assessments, and more.
If you think about it, right, a lot of times, even if, when people use the term therapist, they are probably social workers. Therapist is kind of a catch-all term that people have used and kind of coined. But at the same time, a large majority of the therapists are probably social workers. And so as we think about, the spaces that social workers work in, that's going to include child welfare, and behavioral health kind of intersects with all of these different things. So child welfare, gerontology, medical social work, immigration, incarceration. You think about it, there's going to be a social worker there to provide services, especially in schools. There's been an increase in school-related shootings and mass shootings, right? And so social workers, school social workers are there on the front lines working with students, trying to help them to deal with that trauma, trying to help them to deal with that loss when those issues occur.
These professionals have the training to step in during the most challenging and stressful times and take action and advocate for people who are exceptionally vulnerable. However, this relentless cycle, coupled with low pay, long hours, and increasing demand, has taken a big toll.
I think one of the things that we don't talk about enough is that there is social work burnout. And so that comes from high caseloads, low pay, and just working conditions that aren't conducive to the overall wellness of social workers or any employee for that matter.
Estreet says that in order to practice social work at a fully licensed level, most states require that applicants hold at least a master's degree. This means that the average person coming out of undergrad and grad school with a social work degree has loans totaling more than $100,000. One way that students are trying to lower this accumulated debt is by pushing for greater financial assistance during college.
There's a growing movement in the student sector of pay for placement. And so what that looks like is in the social work programs, there is a requirement of an internship that students have to do, which is live training at an agency to be able to practice your social work skills. Students are now looking at the burden on students to engage in that and how they can be compensated for their placement experience. And so that is a conversation that is emerging, which I think is really being looked at by social work education and how they can address this. But the students are really passionate about a lot of these changes to the profession. So I think that we are going to see some changes in the profession.
Today, many practicing social workers are struggling to dig themselves out of student loan debt because salaries have failed to keep up with basic living costs, inflation, and the licensing demands of the profession. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, in 2021, the median annual pay for a social worker in the U.S. was just over $50,000 per year. That's much less than several other roles in healthcare.
So when we look at certain things like Medicaid and Medicare reimbursement, we get paid 75% of the doctor schedule, right? And so what that means is for every dollar that a doctor makes on a similar service, we get paid 75 cents. So when we think about pay equity, that is a huge issue. The other issue that is a barrier is around loans.
Estreet points out that there are certain loan forgiveness programs that can help social workers who have outstanding student loan debt. However, he says there's still no 100% guarantee that loans will be forgiven.
We have been seeing more and more social workers get approved for that. There's also the National Health Service, NHSC, National Health Service Corps, that provides loan repayment up to a certain point for social workers that are working in high need areas. And so there are a lot of opportunities for loan forgiveness. I think it takes time and, there are certain barriers, right? So for example, the NHSC loan repayment, you have to be an independent social worker. So that is 2 years postmasters and already licensed at that independent level in order to apply. And then with the federal loan forgiveness program, I think you have to be working in an approved sector for 10 years before even being considered. So that's a long time to carry the weight of loans, and they're also accruing interest. So that is debt on top of debt, and there's no 100% guarantee that you're going to be selected for those loan repayment programs. So I think, as we think about loan repayment, having some more certainties, but also having some more pathways for social workers to consider.
The reality is that while demand is growing, the incentive to head into social work still lags far behind. Estreet says that people in this profession are passionate about their jobs and want to make a difference, but it's extremely hard to work long-term in this environment. Higher pay and better work-life balance are just some of the many issues that need to be improved upon. Over the next decade, the BLS predicts that demand for social workers will grow by 9%, creating a need for 64,000 more positions, on top of the already 700,000 across the U.S. In order to meet this growth, it's important to understand the current sector and the many challenges workers are facing today. You can learn more about this topic, resources, and our guest, Dr. Anthony Estreet, by visiting viewpointsradio.org. Find out more about the National Association of Social Workers by visiting the site socialworkers.org. For more behind the scenes, search Viewpoints Radio on Twitter and Facebook. This segment was written and produced by executive producer Amira Zaveri. Our production manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Gary Price. Coming up on Viewpoints.
We're told every day, mostly on the internet, that you can't pronounce the name of a chemical. It must automatically be bad for you.
What does the long list of ingredients truly mean? Then,
was there a time when you really needed me and I didn't come because I was working?
Taking time this Mother's Day to recognize the many challenges of motherhood. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.